You're watching The Hard Truth with Tony Shaffer on America Out Loud Radio Network, brought to you by 6 Hour, Never Settle. Hi, I'm Tony Shaffer, and this is The Hard Truth, and we're going to go through some things today that will help educate and enlighten your understanding of current national security and, frankly, constitutional issues which our country is being challenged by today. And today, our first program, I am deeply honored and appreciative of having my friend, Arizona Congressman Andy Biggs. Andy, God bless you. Thank you for being on The Hard Truth with Tony Shaffer.
Tony, congrats on the first show. It's an honor to be with you. And I hope I'm worthy of making this interesting for you and everyone.
Anybody who can pull off the blacklist look to launch an impeachment, I'm with. So just saying. So good on you. And so let's start with that. So, man, I can't think of a better topic to jump into by the fact that we recognize now, Andy, that the southwest border is not only bad for your citizens, bad for our economy, but it's open to human trafficking. It's open to terrorists. It's open to me. The most important issue to me is the current war with China. I'll just be direct on that. And the fact that they're purposely flooding fentanyl across the border into our country. I don't know of a single community not affected by that. As the audience probably knows, I'm a member of law enforcement in Virginia. I still work for Sheriff Dave Decatur as his Homeland Security Advisor. His department recently was hit by a deputy simply touching a container in a car and dropping over, passed out from fentanyl. So just give us a little bit of a snapshot and background on how you came to lead this effort and what to expect next.
Well, Tony, thanks. When I first started this, it was about 6 months into Mayorkas' reign of terror.
Yeah.
He had produced record levels at the border. Everything, as you say, from fentanyl, human trafficking, sex trafficking, drug trafficking, but also just the raw numbers of encounters.
Right.
We'd already seen a spike in the number of terrorists on the watch list that had been apprehended. Mm-hmm. We'd seen criminal gang members come in, and we all of those were records every month after month for the first 6 months. And now you get to this, and we're 25 months in, and for 20, I think only 1 month did it not set a new record, and including in December, 250,000. Now we've been working on this again, trying, because we want to be rational and fair using the impeachment. Impeachment's a radical thing. I mean,
right.
it's so you want to make sure that you have your T's crossed and your I's dotted before you go forward. And so we spent some extra time making sure we could prove every allegation that we were making. And in the meantime, we can't even keep up with all of the stuff that he's doing. And I mean, I'm happy to go into as much detail as you want, but what he has done, Tony, top line is this: nations begin to disintegrate and go away when they lose control of their sovereign borders.
Absolutely.
And we do not have control of our southern border. It's the criminal cartels of Mexico that have that control our borders.
No, you might find this ironic. I was at JADF East, which is now JADF South at Key West, working the counter drug issue. And long before you became a member of Congress in the 90s, when I was a young major, I proposed that we map, like a military challenge, all of Mexico, because we recognized at the time that cartels were growing rapidly, and we wanted to identify centers of gravity to stop it. And the ATF vetoed that because, oh my God, we don't want to actually know what's going on down there.
Yeah.
And I think this has been a trend that has been going on. So I don't think we can blame everything on Mayorkas. With that said, Mayorkas is the guy who now has opened the spigots to all the bad policies, and now we're suffering greatly. And your state trying to use containers to seal off the border, brilliant. Fighting a battle over that is insane. Texas, the same thing, trying to find ways to protect your citizens. And part of our job as Project Sentinel is to recognize the need to return to fundamental theories and policies of the founding fathers. One of those is the 10th Amendment. Andy, I don't know why states can't do what they need to do, in this case especially, to defend their border. But again, I think holding Mayorkas accountable and stopping him from the bad policies is a beginning.
Yeah, I agree. And with 15 years ago, we did something in Arizona. We tried to get something going forward. Probably closer to 12 years ago. Well, maybe 15 now, but called
Yeah.
SB 1070, where we were trying to get the state to be able to just simply enforce the immigration laws,
Right.
because we were being overrun. And
Right.
the Supreme Court actually said we could do certain aspects of it. We couldn't do all aspects, but we could at least obtain identification from the people to determine whether they were legally in the country, and
Right.
then we could detain and turn them over to ICE. Well, that doesn't work when ICE won't honor the detainers.
Yeah.
And that's what's happening here. This administration has said we're not going to do that. But so the states, they're having to step up. I introduced legislation to allow states to enforce federal immigration law.
Right.
Because the feds aren't doing it. There's a gap there. It's dangerous for the states, and you got to. I'm with you on the 10th Amendment. The federal government is way too big, way too involved, and way too politicized. And places like Texas, Arizona, even California, New Mexico, they're going to adopt policies that they need to control the safety, the border, to protect the safety and security of their citizens. And the federal government just needs to get the heck out of the way if we're not going to enforce the federal law.
So you have a governor thinking a lot like that we'll be meeting with in the near future. I want to tease it without getting into detail, but you have a big supporter of this concept, which we plan on working with to do that. And Andy, part of this is we believe is our Project Sentinel, is to help states work to share policies that work in their interest and the interest of people, but more on that to come down the road. I'm sure we'll ask you to come back and talk about that. But let's talk next about your effort to successfully leverage and get concessions from the Speaker of the House before he became Speaker of the House. Brilliant. Kudos to you. I know there was a lot of tension behind the scenes. How'd you do it? Just give us a little hint, because I know certain people on the left are very envious of what you did, because they said they would do it and they didn't do it, but you did it. So tell us about that.
Well, what happens is in legislating and politics, leverage is critical.
Yes.
And so if you don't, leverage basically boils down to this: if you have something somebody wants and they can't get anywhere else, you've got leverage, you've got ownership. And so we had some leverage. And we stuck together, and that's the critical thing. Is if people don't stick together, then they break up. And I think that's what they thought. Some of my friends thought was going to happen, that we'd break up, but we stayed together. And what 5 of us came out right away. And when the 5 of us came out right away, it allowed, just by the math, you said, well, Mr. McCarthy doesn't have it, and so that allowed. As the closer you got to the deadline, too, that's right. Part of the leverage that allowed, another I think 7-8 people came out in a letter and said they're not going to vote for him unless he does certain things. All of a sudden, you had a room to negotiate in.
Right.
And when on January, we always know this. You get a better deal at 12:01 than at 11:59, and so when the first ballot went and he lost, and the second ballot, and then the third ballot, then all of a sudden you actually had a space where people were willing to talk, where they weren't willing to talk until that point. And so the things that have happened is you've seen the rules already have changed the infrastructure of the place.
For the better.
Yeah, for the better, by the long shot. So you got people on rules committee now that are going to fight to make sure that conservative ideas make it onto bills. You saw last week, Tony, as a result of what we did, the first modified rule. What that means is it was the first time in more than 7 years that people could go down on the floor and actually offer amendments to a bill and debate those amendments and have a vote on them.
Yeah.
Imagine that. The people's representatives, for the first time in 7 years, could actually go down and debate and have votes. And so I think that's huge. The 72-hour rule, just a whole series of things. And one of my favorite comments, though, came from Paul Ryan after it all had been completed and we walked out of there. He said, "Yeah, when I was Speaker of the House, I thought I had too much power too." and then of course, he never would have given it up.
Yeah, of course, they never do.
And that was the deal. You could Kevin wasn't going to willingly just democratize or open up or diffuse the power to members, but that's what's happened. Power has been diffused to the people. Kevin's still the speaker, still has that leadership role, but you've really allowed more people to participate and go forward. And I think that's what's supposed to happen in a constitutional republic.
Well, obviously, the founding fathers felt that the division of government was division of power was critical, and I appreciate, Andy, you returning that to a way that people will see what's going on. Obviously, my friends and mentors in Congress, Louis Gohmert, the late Representative Walter Jones, were all about transparency and debate. So, I appreciate you guys being successful in getting this done. So does our audience. Next thing are related, which is essentially national security. And I'm going to throw three things out there, Andy. Deal with them how you want. First off, we're coming up on this debt ceiling debate. I'm one who believes that our debt is a national security issue. The more we leverage and provide, one of the notable things for the audience to understand, appropriated dollars and spending are not related. We no longer worry about appropriation of money because they just print money. And I would argue it's put us in a position of where those things which people find value in, 401ks, are inherently devalued by the government printing money, which then really hurts the little guy. And so I don't know if people really understand that. We'll be trying to go in more detail. I don't want to get you pinned down on this because I just want to get your sense of, will the speaker hold Biden's feet to the fire on this? And then part two of that is this incessant and continuous spending of the new Green Deal, which is really the new green hoax, and then this open-ended support for Ukraine, which I just don't think is sustainable or in our interest. We've never established our national interests regarding Ukraine, let alone funding a war, which I ultimately think Ukraine's going to lose, just if you look at the numbers. So sorry, it's a lot to throw out there, but could we start with the debt ceiling issue and then go through that? So,
yeah, they're all related, and I appreciate you bringing them up because I do think. Can I start with the Ukraine? Because I think
I'm happy to start with it because absolutely.
So there is no national security interest for the U.S. being in Ukraine.
Correct.
And there is. It has become a proxy war between the Biden administration, it isn't the United States, but the Biden administration and the war hawks in Congress and Russia.
Right.
And the reality is we cannot afford it. It's not sustainable. We don't have an identified national security interest.
We do not.
If you had a national security interest, then everybody could easily identify the exit point because you'd know what victory looks like.
Absolutely. Well,
nobody can tell you. Nobody can say, well, victory is X or Y. So now they're saying, they're all over the place. Now they're saying, well, you get Crimea back. You get the Donbass region back.
No, we don't want that. That's not in our interest.
That's not our interest. I mean, so it's not our job. So the bottom line is you should never send any more material or dollars to Ukraine. You should be ready for humanitarian need because that's the way we are.
Yeah. Oh, Andy, I've seen some, just real quick, I've seen some insanity from some of the folks in the neocon sect trying to justify everything you just said by the fact that, it's in our interest to weaken Russia. No, we tried that in Syria. It didn't work out very well once we had ungoverned space. Just saying. I think we've been down that path. Libya, I don't think we want to go down that road with Russia. Sorry, didn't interrupt, but I wanted to throw that in.
Yeah, I mean, because look, Russia is already weaker than any in the intelligence community thought, Tony.
Right.
But they still have nuclear weapons. Okay, so let's give them their due, and there's still a power. I'm much more concerned about China if we're going to talk about geopolitical rising hegemons. I'm much more concerned about China than I am about Russia. Russia is a regional player. It is not a world player, but for the fact they have nuclear weapons. Anyway, so we leave that aside. So the point is we need to exit. We need to exit that path and just basically tell the Europeans it's your baby because it's in your backyard. You can't be Germany and say, well, we're going to be there to help rebuild Ukraine when it's over. No, you do whatever you're going to do, but we won't be there. We're done. So that would save us a whole bunch of money in and of itself. Second point is I can't remember where we went.
Oh, well, just the debt ceiling and also the new Green Deal. And I want to hit
China's new Green Deal. Okay, so debt ceiling. Here's where we deal with debt ceiling. People are arguing, and you're going to hear this, Tony. If we don't raise the debt ceiling, we're not going to pay our debts, and the
I've heard the propaganda. Yeah, we all
have. All the propaganda. The reality is this: our debt is held largely by the Social Security Trust Fund, Medicare Trust Fund, and the Federal Reserve.
Right.
Those are the people who own like 70% of our debt. Then you have other places like China, UK, and Japan. And then you have a small percentage owned by individual institutional investors in the United States. So leave that aside. We are not going to default on our debts.
Right.
But by the same token, by the number that they are kicking around is $2.6 trillion over to kick off the debt ceiling for 2 years. Tony, that would take us to $34 trillion plus in national debt.
Right.
And the bottom line is you better do something. There's some things, and I've been trying to work with other members to put these ideas in their heads. You got to claw back. You got to do rescission. You need to find out what agencies have cash that's unencumbered, and you start pulling that back in. You start pulling back COVID relief money that was never been spent. You start clawing back fraud money that the fraudsters and the improper payments of COVID relief. That's one thing. Then the second thing is you first go to discretionary spending, and you just say, what do we have that we can get rid of? Well, there's a lot of discretionary spending. One thing that would actually save you hundreds of billions of dollars is if you said, we're going to do, you actually have to go to work, have a work requirement if you're going to get means-tested social welfare. You actually have to provide identification and verify who you are so we know who you are. Those types of things actually move fraudsters off and actually get people back working. So that you don't have, because we're hearing, we don't have enough workers. Well, you don't have enough workers because we've incentivized people to stay home. And what will happen is you have a twofer for your economy. You start reducing the amount of money necessary for social welfare, which eases your necessity for raising the debt ceiling, but you also put more people back in the workforce.
Right.
And the third thing is let's just face it, the Pentagon, we don't want to emasculate the Pentagon the way Obama and Biden want to, but we know there's massive amounts of waste in administration, et cetera, in DOD. Find them, eliminate them, and if it's as much as some experts have indicated publicly, you might save anywhere from $75 to $125 billion per year just in waste and administration. That also begins lowering it. And then you start freezing some of these other programs. And what does that do? You're trying to get a glide path to get a balanced budget so you stop this reckless federal spending.
Right.
And one place where you can really get after it, Tony, is go after all the woke and the Green New Deal programs.
Oh, yes. That's what I'm going to bring up.
Yeah, that have been spent and that are out there. And you start clawing that money back, whether it's from the, what did they call it, the infrastructure bill, or whether it's from the omnibus bill. That between the two of those, that's over $3 trillion. And it's loaded with Green New Deal. The transportation thing had about 60% of that was Green New Deal stuff. Identify that, start clawing that back.
Right.
And again, it's a twofer because you're pulling money away from over bloated federal programs that will control the American populace, and then you also start kicking the can down and fixing your budget, so you've reduced the overall spending.
So on that point, Andy, as you saw, I'm sure, Al Gore admitted that the Inflation Reduction Act was nothing more than a new Green Deal retooling and put out there, which frankly is going to do everything you just talked about, all this woke stuff that will not only damage the American economy, but limit the options of American citizens. I still don't understand how the government, Andy, has the authority to tell me what kind of light bulb I can buy or not buy. I'm still trying to figure out where that's in the Constitution. It's like, I've read the Constitution a couple of times. It's not in there. Just saying. Yeah. And to that point, Yeah, no, there's no authority. And then also on this new Green Deal issue, again, for the audience to understand, I've got a degree in this. I know what a hoax it is from the fact I got a degree in it. There are good people trying to do good things, but it was hijacked by the left for purposes of trying to make CO2 a plant food, which we exhale, the bad guy. And
Yeah,
people,
that's right.
yeah, I mean, it's insane. It's completely
Yeah.
insane, irrational. It's become their religion. So, Andy, I know that every time you bring this up, you're basically taking a dagger and trying to put it into the heart of their religion. That's why they fight so hard on this stuff.
Yes, that's right.
If I could make an editorial comment for a minute on that.
Yeah,
but go ahead, Andy. But yeah,
I just want to agree with you, Tony. It is a faith. It is almost a religious dogma.
Yes.
And so when we talk about it, that's why they practically shed tears with their testimony.
They do.
because they have faith in it. They say we're going to follow the science, but then they don't follow the science.
Right.
Instead, they have this weird faith, and it's disgusting. That's why you got people eating bugs now in Europe and wanting to do bugs all over the U.S. As additives to our food.
Oh, and ultimately they want us to own nothing and be happy, which I don't think is in the cards. Just saying. So let's circle this back because all roads of green new energy lead to China. They're going to be owning lithium, all the different rare earths. They're the ones that are going to be producing them. I think I even saw you do an interview where you addressed some of this recently. What the heck are we doing? I mean, why in the world would you leave if you do believe in the new Green Deal, if you really think it's true, which it's not, why would you leave all of the controls of that new Green Deal to the Chinese? And one thing that's kind of ironic, if not stupid, they're never going to comply, Andy, with a single requirement of the Paris Climate Accords. Not a one. They're going to build coal-fired plants. They're going to burn to sustain their economy. I'm not going to put you on the spot, but I want you to think about next time you come back about if we can talk about Biden and Hunter and Joe regarding what's going on with them, because we'll probably be down the road further on those investigations. But is it a coincidence or not that we seem to be deferring to China constantly on new Green Deal, on the fentanyl issue we started off talking about, and Swalwell, Representative Swalwell, Senator Feinstein, Joe Biden, Hunter Biden? Is there any link, you think, between these politicians leaving the southwest border open, giving deference to China, buying into the new Green Deal, transferring wealth from us to China to buy that deal? Do you think there's a link there, maybe?
Well, you know what? If you weren't, such a conspiracy theorist, Tony, here's what I know. The southwest border is open not because of incompetence or accidents or a glitch in the system. It's a feature.
Right.
Here's what I know. Emasculating the Trump era tax and business policies that were bringing businesses back and getting rid of the tariffs on China and allowing China to continue to be bellicose with our money, because that's what's happening. We're transfer. It's the biggest wealth transfer in the history of the world. Is when we decided in the late '90s we were going to actually facilitate Deng Xiaoping's modernization movement within China. And when that happened, you had Bill Clinton providing tech transfer, and they actually literally skipped 2 generations of technology growth that we had to go through. We just gave it to them and then you have businesses that now identify more as international companies instead of U.S. companies who made their money in the U.S., got their start in the U.S. with our free market system, and then they're transferring wealth and kowtowing, and that is an old Chinese word, by the way. They're kowtowing to Xi Jinping. You would think that maybe these people just don't like the United States of America and prefer some other nation like China to go ahead and rise and be the world hegemon. The other thing to it, and Tony, we really didn't get into this, but this deterioration of the U.S. Currency and our economic system, we're only saved right now.
Andy, they're out to undermine our currency. I don't see how people don't see that. I mean, it's like...
Yeah,
it's obvious to me, and I'm not an economist.
If the United States was not the international, the dollar wasn't the international currency of exchange, we would already be feeling massive, even more inflation because of the devaluation of our currency. Now, that's by the way, that is the classical definition of inflation, is the devaluation of your currency. And then you add in there, by the way, then you add in the fact that they don't, getting back to your question about lithium and other critical minerals.
All the critical things,
yeah. We've got great critical minerals in Arizona, Nevada, northern Minnesota. The U.S. is so blessed with abundant access to critical minerals. If we could just allow the access. How about the energy? If we were energy independent, and we were mining our critical minerals, the U.S. would be light years ahead. And why aren't we? Because we've put more controls and constraints on our American businesses and mining than they have in China. And they're building, are they still building a coal-fired plant a week there? I don't know, but they were for a significant period of time.
Well, Andy, I could talk to you all day and we would enjoy it and actually educate people, but I know your staff would have my head if I don't let you go now.
They're shaking a watch at me right now, Tony.
I know. My staff's doing it's like, hey, countdown. Well, God bless Andy. I always enjoy our conversations. I love what you're doing. Please come back anytime. I want to let our audience kind of go through everything we talked about today, and I'd like to have you come back on a regular basis so we can continue this process of education. We covered a lot today, but man, it is the hard truth. That's what the name of the show is. Last time I checked. I appreciate you being here, Andy. Any last words you want to say?
Well, God bless you, Tony, and look forward to doing it again.
Great, thanks, and thank you all for being here. And we're going to go into phase 2, part 2 of the show. This is Tony Shaffer and the Hard Truth, and we'll be talking to you after the break. Hi, we're back. Tony Shaffer and the Hard Truth. And man, did we get some hard truth laid on us by Arizona Congressman Andy Biggs. So I'm being joined now by my colleagues and fellow partners in crime, and I do mean crime, but the good kind of crime, the crime that they don't put you in jail for. They name a high school after you, long after you're dead, right? That's the kind of crime we're talking. So just keep that in mind. Put that in context. So I've got Elizabeth Breckenkamp, a colleague from the Army. Say hello, Elizabeth.
Hello, everyone.
So we worked together back during my last assignment in the U.S. Army down at Fort Lee, and she is an eminently qualified student of human behavior in the world. And then, of course, our senior producer, executive producer, all-around good guy, 80s guru, star of stage and screen, Chris Cordani. Hey, Chris.
Face for radio, you know how it works. Oh, boy.
So here we are. So thank you both for being here on our first program. I'm excited by this. Man, what a great interview. And it wasn't because I was on it, it's because Andy actually did an amazing job of laying out the agenda of the current Republican Congress, at least the good guys in the Republican side. So let's start with Elizabeth. Elizabeth, you and I have shared information about these issues for years now. And this is the first opportunity you're coming on to talk about this. So you kind of represent the interest of our audience because you've been an audience of ours and you've been involved. So what is your biggest takeaway of the discussion with Representative Biggs?
Well, as he was talking, I was writing notes, taking notes, and just, everything he says, he's just spot on. I thought one of the funny things, he said, all green energy roads do lead to China.
They do.
Yeah.
That's why I put those questions together like that. Yeah, I mean, it's all related.
The way he said it, I thought, man, that's really sharp. That's a really good observation because everything about the green energy eventually leads to China, which is why I don't understand how anyone, whether it's Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and, Ilhan Omar, why they're so obsessed with green energy. And I believe, Tony, you had said it in your interview that they really are not proud of living in America.
Of course,
they want to basically destroy the Constitution, which is what gives them the freedoms to do what they do in the first place. Right. And that's a really sad irony. And I always think, and it's kind of like a little bit off on a tangent, but if you really hate America so much, why are you still here? I don't mean that in a mean way. People have, unlike, North Korea, you have the option to move to another country. If you don't like it, you can move back. But don't try to change the foundation that gives you the freedoms that you have in this country and then expect everyone to just go along with it. Like you, and I believe you had said it also, the people for the green energy and for, trying to make everybody buy electric cars. God forbid we have, gas and fuel and diesel for our cars. They say, we just want to take everything away from you and you should be happy.
Well, exactly. That's why I use that phrase
that was really good.
You will own nothing and be happy, and for our audience to remember, and our fellow Chris produces something called Thought to Action, where we do the what do we call it, Chris? The Global Roundtable.
We have a few of them. We have the Great Reset Roundtable.
Reset table.
Find that on
to be known as Anne Prince. She changed her name, So anyway, so Elizabeth, as Elizabeth said, we actually have a series of Great Reset Roundtables where we actually go through and examine this in great detail, which I do recommend y'all come over and check out separately from our radio program. But also for this program, we do plan on bringing on folks like Representative Biggs, like Andy, and others who can actually provide context to the bad policies we're now faced with. So that's great. So over to Chris. Chris, you're an old hand at this. We covered a lot of territory you're already aware of, but like Elizabeth said, Andy seemed to add some really good context to some of the issues we're dealing with right now.
A lot of what Representative Biggs has done was point out the obvious as well to people who've known it for about 10, 15, 20 years, never bothered to do anything about it. The great thing about having Biggs on is he's one of those few Congress members who are rolling up their sleeves and getting things done. Not the symbolism, not saying, hey, we're going to do this, this, and this, and hold it off to the next election. These are the guys that told McCarthy, hey, if we'll let you be the speaker, but we want these things to happen. We want to get things done. We don't want to make promises and then go back to our constituents and remake those promises and never get anything done. Right. One thing that really stuck to us that we've all known for all these years, but many are afraid to say, now that we have politicians like Biggs in office who are not afraid to. The idea is the leading nations of the world are trying to weaken themselves. Mainly it's us, Canada, the Western European nations. We're trying to weaken ourselves to maybe put together a ruse that the rest of the world will become, or at least will raise their standards of living.
Right.
In many ways. The problem is, though, how do we do that? Usually, it's through emotional appeals, and that's why this whole climate change thing is the big pilot. Look, if climate change is the new, that's racist. The idea is if you don't comply with what the World Economic Forum says, if you don't comply with telling our farmers or telling your farmers to stop producing certain things, if you don't comply by buying these electric cars, then you hate the environment and you are going to keep climate change going.
Yeah,
exactly.
And let me break that down. And so much of, I think, our job here is to help people understand the reality behind the emotion. So one of the things that major cities have said within the last 4 or 5 months, I should clarify my comment, major progressive controlled cities and states, California, San Francisco, Oregon, all those folks have basically stated that it is their policy goal to have at least 30% of all automotive fleets. That is to say that they're going to dictate to their people that you will own an electric car and be happy, 30% by the year 2030. Now we're at 23? That's 7 years from now. Now, Elizabeth and Chris, I don't know if people understand what that means simply in rare earth minerals and resources to make that work. And then the second phase of that is the power. Where are you going to get all this power to charge all of those batteries, which on a grid, which by all accounts is already being strained and stretched within the current context of what they have to provide? Heck, California, every time you have temperatures above 80 degrees, people are dying because they have rolling blackouts. I mean, so you have this, to Andy's point, this sounds like a religion. It sounds like a cult. What do you all think?
I agree. Yeah, it is a cult. It's by the actual definition of a cult. Yes. It's insane. I think, like you're saying, they're so emotional.
They are emotional.
That's one of the biggest differences. And I can say about even people in my own family, the difference between people who are so far left and then people who are right. And I know there's like maybe some in the middle, but generally left or right. They base all their decisions on their feelings, and they don't think about the second and third order effects.
Right.
They don't even think about the initial effects of 5 or 10 years from now. If you're going to try to force everyone to buy electric, they don't see the second order. They don't even see the third order effects.
No,
like
they don't look at any of that.
Children's children, and like you're talking about, all the minerals in the earth. What are we doing? Yeah, the fossil fuels. Right. It's like they act like, oh my gosh, you can't have that smoke in the air. We're all going to die. Yeah, and they just don't think about the consequences of their actions, which kind of leads me into, other things like with the border and so many other issues.
Right.
People have got to understand that elections always have consequences. Who you vote for there's always a consequence. And that's another thing. They don't think about it. Oh, we don't like Trump. He's mean. So we're going to vote for this really nice guy. And it's like, no.
Joe Biden's not a nice guy. I know Joe. Just saying.
They like his son. Here's something about Joe that's really interesting. Everybody's going on about George Santos. Remember George Santos? He's lying about this. I'm no fan of Santos for what he's been for what he did. I get that. But these same people who are criticizing Santos elected a president who lied about where he stood in his
every step of the way.
In his law class and things like that. There was a video going around when he was running for president, bragging about his graduating very high in his law school class and all these other things that he's lied about over. Even in a press conference earlier this week, repeated that Amtrak story that was already debunked.
Oh, did you hear the new one? He actually had a key to the cars, and he would ride with the engineers 15% of the time. It's like, no, he never rode with the engineers. That's not. I mean, that's just like beyond stupid. But no, I mean, it always changes. So, and that's the thing. I'm glad you brought that up, Chris, because members of the media aren't doing that. They aren't saying, "Well, what about Joe?" I mean, every time they say something about Santos is bad, but your guy is worse by an order of magnitude. And one of the things I put on Twitter the other day, because y'all know I'm back on Twitter, which is good. Yay. I said, how does someone have a $2.7 million beach house plus 3 other houses after being a member of Congress? How's that even possible?
I always say to people that have conversations with me about politics and how there are certain people that like to worship politicians, worship those who are in office. I get that because we're a celebrity nation.
Some people like worshiping gerbils too, but I don't like them either.
I'm with you there.
Just saying.
But these,
I don't.
I just tell
gerbils
them, hey,
are nice, but they're not to be worshipped, nor are politicians. If you want to get technical, just say.
Right. And
if you want to.
And the politicians you don't trust. Most of them say, well, most of them the orange man bed types. Well, I tell them, all right, here you go. You vote for your people, we vote for ours. The fact is, never trust a politician who's gained personal wealth exponentially while holding office.
Exactly.
That should never ever happen.
Mm-hmm.
And
a couple come to mind. Ocasio-Cortez. I can't even do the tongue thing. Cortez. And then who's that person in Florida? I mean, not Florida. Georgia that ran for governor. Stacey Abrams, who went from being in debt to a multimillionaire. How do you do that? I mean,
she didn't hold public office, though.
Yeah.
So I guess that's okay.
Well, she held something because, just saying. I mean,
I will say President Obama is one of those, though, who gained a multitude of wealth while in office.
He did. And by the way, just for the audience to understand, they do this through their book sales. I mean, do you know anybody who really I can't wait to get Obama's book and read. I'm going to read it to my kids and I can't wait to tell stories around the campfire. Do you know someone who did that, Elizabeth?
Yes. Someone in my own family.
Really?
My brother and his wife. Oh my God.
Well, I don't think they have a lot of people, because what they do a lot of the time is they buy these things in mass, make it look like it's a bestseller, and send them to big warehouses in China so they can enrich these folks via the sale. But tell us about your relative. This sounds interesting. I want to hear about this.
Okay, so I'm the youngest of 4. My parents, I thought they raised us all the same. It's amazing how you can have siblings and you're all grew up so differently.
Yeah.
So I'm the youngest of 4. I'm the only conservative. My 2 older brothers and my sister are very, very liberal Democrats. Both my brothers married women who are very liberal. And my parents are conservative. It's just bizarre. And the thing is, I have no problem having arguments, debates, whatever, as long as it doesn't get heated. But you got to have some kind of evidence to support your claim. And
I would think so.
And we're sitting around the Thanksgiving table and we're sharing. It's like, I really don't want to bring up politics, but when somebody else says something, like one of my liberal family, I have to say, and Bob says something too, because my husband is very conservative and he is sharp. He can remember things from American history that most people our age don't even know. They never even learned in school. So it's fun. It's fun. But the good thing is no one has disassociated except for my son, who's 36, and he's very liberal and very progressive, and
So
he lives up in New York, so he is in AOC territory.
So I'm always curious because part of our job, part of our mission is to do outreach to the other side. So Chris and I have spoken about this. Some of you know in the audience that I've talked about my advising Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard before she left office. And one of the notable things for the audience who hasn't heard this story, because I know some of them probably have, Dennis Kucinich, a Democrat, came to me back in 2015 and said, hey, would you do me a favor? And Elizabeth, you know who Dennis Kucinich is, right? You know Dennis?
That name sounds so familiar.
He's kind of a wild guy from Ohio. Not that Ohio and wild go together. I'm just saying it just happened to be in his case. Not that don't Ohio, don't call us and complain. Anyway, Dennis was a congressman from I think the northeastern part of the state, and he worked a lot of things. Dennis is a good guy. Dennis came to me and said, "Hey, I've got someone I'd like you to advise." And I said, "Dennis, you're a friend. Who? Anybody you know?" He said, "Tulsi Gabbard." Now, Tulsi was new, as you guys remember back then. She was actually part of the RNC. She was DNC, trying to help a guy named Bernie get elected. Bernie, talk about, he's got like 6 houses, doesn't he? I mean, talk about a guy who's got too many houses for his own good. Boy, he could be a one-man refugee center, right? I mean, right, Senator? He could. I mean, he could like set up his own little reception center. He could be the Bernie Sanders Agency for Resettlement of Refugees. As a matter of fact, we should copyright that and send it to him. Anyway, back to the topic. I said, Dennis, as long as she's willing to take the advice, I'm willing to give it. And sure enough, she did. And so we actually met long before we publicly acknowledged working together on issues. And that's part of the point, Elizabeth, is she was at least willing to hear perspectives that were contrary to her political beliefs. Mm-hmm. Right? I mean, that's pretty important to be open to it.
Right.
And the common area of concern was national security regarding Hawaii. As you guys remember, Little Rocket Man was getting ready to threaten to throw nuclear weapons across the Pacific into Hawaai. Well, it's a legitimate threat. He could do that. And so, the concerns, national security concerns of Tulsi regarding her constituency is how that door got opened. And so I don't understand how we can't do that with more issues like, hey, let's figure out a spot of common ground and open up a conversation. But to me, Elizabeth, most of these folks don't even want to have common ground. They're so committed to a certain belief, a set of beliefs, that anybody who contradicts their beliefs becomes an enemy to their religion. Would that be accurate?
Yeah, I think that's very accurate. Mm-hmm.
So, Chris, how do we combat this? I mean, you're a communications guy longer than me. What should we do to kind of start combating all this?
It's a good question, but if we take ourselves back a little bit, step backward, remember the 1980s, 1990s.
I love the 80s. Yes, I miss the 80s.
Great stuff.
But
the 80s. Republicans and Democrats, with their differences, were able to work together.
Absolutely.
And they were able to, when they both shared power, they were able to find ways to compromise and get some things done. A lot of that stopped, and not during the Trump presidency, as people might think. A lot of that started to really fall down after the 2000 election, when there's a certain side that felt entitled to win, yet they did not, because a certain former vice president couldn't carry his own home state. But then every year after that, all we heard from the media, aside from maybe a 1-2 month period, was Bush is a racist, this, and this. And all of a sudden, there become a huge laid the groundwork for the tribalism we have today, where both sides have become baseball teams, and not the ones that play friendly ball and dodge bullets, but the ones that just are rivals and they hate each other and they will not let the other person score at all.
Right. And
that's to the detriment of the people that they represent. Having said that, we still have to find a way to find common ground. And I do know that there are certain things that the left and the right do not like. And one of them, and I will say this, and I believe we should push this a little more often on this side if we want to reach out to the other side, is Canada's new euthanasia policies. The idea that they're allowing or they're legislating that depressed teenagers, and maybe I'm going a little far, but depressed young people are allowed to have the government assist them if they want to kill themselves.
So let me ask you a question. So you proposing we send all of the progressive politicians to Canada for them to take advantage of this?
I find many on the progressive side, at least in the social media landscape, against that policy. That, really, but a lot of people on the left are against that, as we are.
Yeah,
that's a whole different ballgame than somebody who's like 93 and has 3 types of cancer and is suffering. This is somebody.
No,
who's
I have
just
someone. I know someone personally who's going through that right now. It's terrible, right. but I don't. I know for a fact this person's not contemplating remotely suicide. As a matter of fact, I know he's going to fight to the end, no matter what.
Right.
For doing
right. I'm just saying
that,
that both sides can agree to certain things, and this might be one of them.
To that point, though, I mean, again, how do you get through to people who believe somehow that simply because we refer to the Constitution and objective truth as our political foundation? How do we get to people who are emotionally unavailable? And by the way, I guess we all go through that when we're dating people, right? Not that I want to bring up dating. This is not a dating show, just saying. But we've all dated people who are making the analogy. Yeah, it's like we've all dated people who are emotionally unavailable. You know, it's kind of the same thing here. It's like, how do you get through to people who just simply have checked out of being tied to the objective reality we all agree upon? So, Elizabeth, you have any thoughts on that? Because it's a tough one.
I believe in the power of prayer. We don't have to get religious, but I do believe in prayer. Sometimes when you sit down, like even with my son, I can have conversation, I can debate things with him, but he still thinks he's smarter than I am. He thinks he knows more than I do because he spent all this money on a bachelor's, a master's. He even has, all this formal, expensive education that makes them apparently.
I feel so sorry for you. Now I know people who become so emotionally attached to their academic success that they lose all track. My friend Jim Walker, Dr. Walker, he may hear this. Jim once told me back in college that there's a statistical. They did an evaluation of people with high-level degrees, and I don't know if you know this, and you got to use this with your son. Once someone gets a high-level degree, their IQ drops because they believe they know everything there is to know, and they stop learning. Just saying. Just saying. So,
Yeah, I think that is part of the problem. Yeah. It seems like, I can even compare that to my family. The people in my family, my brothers and my sister who spent the most on formal education are the most ignorant of just basic American history.
Right.
Like, have you ever read the Constitution? I don't think any of them have ever actually read the Constitution.
Right. So that's where we're going to go with this.
I really pray a lot for people who just are so emotional. I pray a lot.
Yeah, no, I do too. I am, the audience doesn't know this, but I'm much more spiritual than I think I let on publicly, but that's okay. That's for another show. We should go through and explore that. So Chris, over to you for the last word. I guess we're getting ready to wrap up here. So we've talked a lot about the spectrum of challenges we face. I think Andy Biggs, Representative Biggs, did a good job of giving content and context to some of the things we face. What's next? What should we take away? What's our thought to action for today's program?
Well, the idea is to push, and don't let media pressure or even social media pressure get to you at this point. A lot of people on the right are afraid to maybe vote for somebody or support somebody publicly who will go out and roll up their sleeves and do anything. We've been trained, and I'm saying collective we, not you and I, and not Elizabeth, not our listeners here, but many have been collectively trained to believe that only politicians can handle matters. The old days of great statesmen coming from other occupations do not exist anymore. You have to follow what the politicians and the science say. Anytime you put a "the" in front of something, don't listen to it. Don't follow it. That's all I'm saying.
You mean, however, the Planet of the Apes? I like that movie.
We could turn into that in that case, but that's a different story for a different day.
Damn you all to hell!
But the takeaway is, if you're not going to be able to go out there and roll up your sleeves and do it yourself, and I know people have jobs, support people like that. Support people like Andy Biggs. And despite, and the media is going to come down on any of them
Oh, yes.
who challenge the religion that you mentioned before, Elizabeth,
Yeah.
the religion of climate change, the religion of far left policies. And that's what I'm going to say. Far left. I don't like to use the word progressive because progressive means progress. They're regressing.
Oh,
And we don't want to
good
be
point.
insurance. We
left
don't want
is
to be
the
sued by
proper
the insurance
term.
company. We don't
Very
be
good
want to
point.
be sued by the insurance company either. Just saying. Not that we want
Regressive.
flow on our case. So
But that's my theory in a nutshell.
that's a good theory. It's based on dare I say rational fact and observations that can be proven and disproven. So
Exactly.
yeah. So I think we've had a good show. This is great. Thank you both for being here for our first program. This has been very enlightening. I do want to actually kind of lay out where we're going next. So we've all kind of analyzed what we're doing. We've analyzed the content and context of Andy. And so what are we going to do in the last couple of minutes we have? What are we going to do with this now to give our audience a sense of where we're going? So Chris, I'm gonna let you go with this one first.
Oh, great. Me. How about this? Keep listening to The Hard Truth with Tony Shaffer. How about that right here on America Out Loud?
Yeah, that's a good beginning. Yeah, that's a start.
Right.
So one of the things we want you all to do as the audience is, do we have a way of getting suggestions in? We got to get suggestions in because I do want to have people respond to our content and make comments on where we're going.
Oh.
And we got some good guests. We're working on this. Both Elizabeth and Chris and another friend of mine are the producers. We're coming up with good guests. There'll be some really good discussions coming, as you can probably tell from this program. And also, again, give us ideas of what you want to hear us talk about, because we're not the good idea fairies. We don't have a corner on that. And Elizabeth, any other ads you want to talk about regarding where we're going to go with the program?
I like what Chris was saying. Keep listening to us.
Keep listening.
And I think another thing is when you're talking about emotional people and whatever side you're on, everyone out there who's listening really should have a desire to learn more, educate yourself, educate yourself on issues and not just the your own personal preference. Really, truly have the desire to educate yourself, be informed.
So be informed, think for yourself. One of the things we may want to do, Chris, is something to think about is kind of who we go to. I spend hours reviewing information every day. As a matter of fact, I'm up till 2 a.m. watching things half the time, just so I know I can pick up stuff and do things quickly. But I think maybe ought to do that. I think we'll have to go through and provide some cross-fertilization of some of the other work we're doing. One of the things I do want people to pay attention to is your production of Thought to Action, which is a lot deeper dive than we can go into here. We got an hour here, but we go through a lot more detail and provide a lot more context to things with a lot of our senior fellows and other folks that we bring in for educational purposes. And boy, that's it. I think that's it for today. Again, thanks to Representative Biggs, Andy Biggs. Andy's been someone who we've worked with behind the scenes in the past, who is clearly committed to protecting the rights and interests of his constituents as well as the nation. We'll bring on some more folks from his caucus and talk more about that. And Chris, am I missing anything since you're the executive producer here?
Thing. How about
What's
tweeting
that?
Tony? You can catch Tony on Twitter. He's back on Twitter. It's T-Spooky, but every letter has an underscore between it. You can also catch Project Sentinel, PRJ. What's at PRJ_Sentinel.
Good. And so, that's it. It's a wrap. Is that what they say in the business, Chris? It's a wrap?
I think so. Or
so,
got ourselves a convoy.
God, one of the people that I'm here because of is my late friend, Walter Jones. Representative Jones was a great man who helped keep everything going in Congress. And another guy I want to acknowledge as part of my first program, again, that he taught me everything I know about radio and show prep, the late Cherie Doyle. Cherie, God bless you, wherever you're at, out past the rim. We miss you, bud. I know you'd be having a good time, so we're going to try to pick up and maintain what you were doing in your show by having great content and real guests to honor your legacy as well. So anyway, thank you all for being here. Again, this is The Hard Truth with Tony Shaffer. And I guess we'll be back every week now, right? That's the idea, right, Chris?
Yes, every week.
We'll see you all in a week. Thanks for being here.